And welcome, ladles and jelly spoons, to King's Bishop Teaches Chess. I'm Coach Daniel, your host, and an international chess coach for beginners and intermediate players. We're going to help you learn some chess tonight by examining some of the games of the great one, Bobby Fischer. These were played at the 22º Torneo Internacional de Ciudad Mar del Plata. Say that 3 times fast. Mar del Plata, Argentina, from March 23rd to April 10th. In 1959, 15 chess masters and grandmasters from Europe and the Americas were invited to compete in this round-robin event. And of course, 16-year-old grandmaster Bobby Fischer was among them. Borislav Ivkov from Yugoslavia, René Letelier Martner from Chile, Ludek Pachman from Czechoslovakia, Miguel Najdorf, who led 8 of his fellow Argentine chess masters in the field. As you can see over here on the cross table, Najdorf and Pachman tied with first place, and Bobby Fischer tying with Ivkov for third place. Not a bad showing, even though Bobby had a horrific start. Very bad start for Bobby. His 2 losses came in the first 5 games, but he had a run of 7.5 out of 8 toward the end. Yes, this is the Najdorf for whom Najdorf's variation of the Sicilian defense is named, which happens to be Bobby Fischer's favorite variation of the Sicilian defense as black. So there you go, and here we go. Let's get into the chess. First round was played on March 23rd, 1959. His opponent, Jaime Emma. Let me tell you a little bit about Jaime Emma. He was born January 17th, 1938. He passed away January 9th, 2005, just shy of his 67th birthday. Emma became a lawyer by profession. He was an enthusiastic disseminator of the game of chess in the media, publishing a weekly column in a magazine called Siete Dias. He did that for several years. Later, he was a regular contributor to the magazine Humor. He won the Argentine Chess Championship in 1978, which was the same year that he earned the title International Master. So you see up here, he is still at National Master when this was played. In 1987, Emma moved to the province of San Luis to teach chess. His journalistic activity annoyed the local authorities, who harassed him, detained him without cause for 25 days in 1992, and then in 1996 expelled him and his family from their home. The Argentine Gaming Federation ceded its headquarters to Emma as a payment of money that they owed him. Okay, Bobby with E4 in this game, and we see Knight C6. Nimzovich's defense is going to be named for Aron Nimzovich, who lived from November 7th, 1886 to March 16th, 1935. Nimzovich was a Latvian-born Danish chess player and writer, and one of the best chess players in the world in the late 1920s. Nimzovich was the foremost figure amongst the hypermodernists. He wrote the very influential book on chess theory, with which you may be familiar, My System. He also had a book called Chess Praxis, published in German originally in 1929, and a copy of that was purchased by a preteen named Tigran Petrosian. Petrosian, of course, would become world champion eventually, and it was the book Chess Praxis that had a great influence on his development as a player. So this move, Knight C6, a very significant move. Nimzovich's defense. That is declined, normally D4 here, and D6. D6 is Williams's variation, and I'm not sure which Williams that is named for. And I don't have my book. Oh, I do have my book. It was on my desk the whole time, right here. There it is. Let's see. I think, is it Elijah Williams? Where's my magnifying glass? Right here. Boy, oh boy. Find Williams first. Ah, yes. Elijah Williams lived from 1810 to 1854. Native of Bristol over in England. He edited one of the earliest chess newspaper columns, and he gave up his job as an apothecary in 1844 to move to London, attempting to earn a living at chess. Okay, I'll not give you too many details about him, but this is Williams's variation, and I should have really had that info up in my notes to begin with. Anyway, Williams's variation, pawn d6, pawn d4 here, and bishop g4. Now, usually knight f6 is played first. We usually start with knight f6, and after knight c3, then bishop g4. That's going to be answered by bishop e3, pawn e6, pawn h3 hitting the bishop, bishop h5, d5. And the most common response is to capture the pawn. Coming back, Emma skips the knight development and goes for bishop g4 right away. Not approved of by the bot. d5 hits the knight here, and knight back to b8. Now you may wonder about attacking the knight, which is pinned. I personally would prefer a move like this, hitting the pinned knight, and I get a star for that. After knight b8, Bobby plays c4, not the most common move, and it gets a question mark. Oh, excuse me, it is the most common move. C4 is the most commonly played move, but it gets a question mark. What do you know? I personally would prefer to develop my bishop, but apparently c4 is most common. You get a check mark there. The bot prefers to attack this bishop. c4 was the move. Now e5. Knight f6 is actually the usual move here, and that gets a check mark. So e5, so en passant played here. Bishop e2 has been tried a handful of times, but en passant in this game. Pawn takes pawn here. Knight c3, knight c6, bishop e2. Knight f6 is played here. Now h3 hitting the bishop, and the bishop retreats to h5. Bishop takes knight, seems preferable. Trade that off. But, oops, bishop h5 was played. Bishop e3. Bishop e7, and white castles. The bot calling for queen b3 here. With the center closed up, you can defer castling, but I thought that white could take the initiative here with knight g5. Hit this pawn with the knight and put the question to the bishop. Instead, Bobby goes ahead and castles. Very principled move. Shouldn't get inaccurate. It's just there were a couple of initiative-grabbing opportunities. Queen d7. Queen d7 seems reasonable enough, but marked inaccurate by the bot. Knight d4, and okay, he is putting the question out here. Maybe knight d2 would be the better way to put that question out there. You know, you're supporting these pawns here. I'll get a thumbs up for that. Knight d4, chosen by Bobby Fischer. Bishop g6, right. Trading bishops would be a bit more active. Knight takes knight here. Pawn takes knight. Pawn e5. Yeah, I guess bishop f3 first would be a good prep move for pawn e5. Pawn e5 it is. Pawn takes pawn. Look at these horrific isolated, doubled isolated pawns. Queen a4. Emma finally castles. You know, c5 might be playable here, though. Put the question out there to the queen. Anyway, he did castle. Queen's rook to d1. Queen to e8. Queen A5 hitting both of these pawns. Bishop D6 defending both of these pawns. C5 says, go away. I will remove the defender and win your pawn. It's a good move. I was actually thinking about lifting my rook and getting doubled, which gets a check mark, but this is a good move. Bishop E7, and sure enough, we're up a pawn. Knight D5 hits the queen, so knight takes knight, and the doubled pawns are dissolved. Oh, I guess he could have grabbed that one. Well, he does now. Queen takes E5, bishop takes the C pawn, queen to C3 here, and black will pick up another pawn because of the super attack right here, which is, I gather, why the bot wanted white to trade here. And then you can take the bishop and keep your pawn. Instead, Bobby played queen c3. Oh, but I've got a queen there. It is twice defended. I don't know what I'm talking about. Bishop does take bishop, though, and we play queen takes bishop here. You can keep more tension here by playing pawn takes bishop, and immediately there's this hit on the enemy rook. Black has to make a decision on what to do. There are a few things he could do. I think just improve his queen, and maybe I'll batter attack that pawn. But if check, then we can take that, and then he can battery attack our pawn. Thusly, and I could defend. Coming back, queen takes the bishop was played. Queen takes the queen. Pawn takes the queen. Queen's rook to e8. Rook takes the rook with check. King takes the rook, maintaining the attack on the e-man. We reach a king rook bishop versus king rook bishop endgame. So it's time to bring the kings to bear. And what better time? So king to f2 defends the e-man. King to e7, hoping to support these pawns. Pawn b4 precludes either of these pawns advancing for the moment. Rook b8, pawn a3 to defend. Rook f8 check. Bishop f3 interposes. Pawn a5. He's willing to give up this pawn to get connected passed pawns. Oh, that's actually not a passed pawn there, but he will get a passed pawn after b takes a5. So this is not really a pawn sacrifice, since these two pawns are easy to attack, and this front one is impossible to defend after rook a8. e4 from Fischer, rook takes a5, e takes d5, c takes d5, rook a1. The bot says go ahead, this is going to be a draw, so the bot says go ahead and just simplify and go on for the draw. But Bobby hanging on to his one passed pawn for the moment. Well, because if you take his pawn, he'll take your pawn. As I just mentioned, Bobby decides to try to hang on to the passed pawn. Look, this pawn's promotion square is covered by the bishop. So if somehow he can get his pawn up here, that's also covered by the bishop. So he's got nothing to lose by playing on here. You know, it's either going to be a draw or by some miracle his opponent will blunder. Well, bishop c2, king e3, working his way toward the queen's side, wanting to help this pawn up the board. King d6 follows suit, king d4, bishop b3, and yeah, rook a4 makes a lot of sense here. Blockading the pawn, giving check, facilitating bishop f5. So, for example, king c3, I play bishop f5. But bishop b3 from Jaime Emma, bishop e2, rook a7, king c3, bishop a4, blockading, king b4, pawn d4, pawn g3, right? Bishop f3, and that's going to keep the enemy rook from giving check from b7 against my king here, right? I understand he's got to move this first. I'm just saying eventually that covers and keeps the rook off that square. But bishop c6 was played here. He played g3, and then bishop c6 was played here. And now rook b7 is a real threat, isn't it? So, right, bishop c2 is shown by the annotator, and that, of course, protects the d3 square for a potential pawn push hitting this bishop. Instead, bishop c6 is played, pawn a4, equal position as long as no one blunders. Bishop e4 right here, bishop b5, rook b7, king c4, right, rook c1. I guess the point is, hey, let's take the open file, and then you have potential infiltration somewhere up here. But king c4 asks what black wants to do about this passed pawn, and that's answered with king e5, defending, pawn a5, making his way further up the board. Rook c7 gives check, king b4, now d3, pawn a6. So hopefully this answered the question earlier, why didn't White simply trade pawns? As you can see, he's inching his way forward and hoping to somehow maybe pin this bishop and promote this pawn somehow. I don't know. It shouldn't happen, but king d4 is played here, and d2 is a strong winning move. a7 is played, rook c8, and inexplicably that's where the game ended in a draw. After all that pushing, Emma said, look, this is going to be a draw, and Bobby agreed. Well, pretty strong by both players. 95.2 accuracy for Fischer, 95.8 accuracy for Emma. Look at that single game performance rating, 2850. Very competitive game, very balanced opening, incredible middle game, incredible precision in the end game on both parts. Dead level the whole way through.